So guys, today's video is going to be one of those kind of longer form podcast videos. At least I think it'll be long. It may not be. But I want to talk about horror in the 90s. Because honestly, I kind of feel a different way about something. And I want to just talk about it. Now, this is not going to be a video where I'm trying to start a debate with my audience. But I am going to give my opinion on something. Because I think this is a very interesting topic. So I have said for a while that horror was not dead in the 90s. You had to go to the video store. And what my big reference is when I said that is Charles Band. I am a huge Full Moon fan. I'm a big fan of Puppet Master, Subspecies, Head of the Family, Castle Freak, you name it. Demonic Toys, Doll Man, all that stuff. Genre-bending stuff, horror and sci-fi stuff that he likes to do. Huge fan of Charles Band. But there's a big argument that, like, you know, no, horror died in the 90s. Really, it really did. Theatrically, there wasn't any big, crazy monster movies, no slasher things going on. And, you know, that's been widely debated for a long time and somewhat factually debated because you can probably see, like, in 1984, the horror movies that came out were probably a lot more plentiful or bountiful than they were in 1994. And I'm not really here to argue that, but I think I'm somewhat wrong about horror in the 90s. Because I feel like there's more to it than just go to the video store. So the reason I'm doing this video is because something sparked an interest in me from something that went down with Scream Factory, and it got me on this total binge of movies. So Scream Factory did this release for this Kurt Russell movie. The name of the movie is Unlawful Entry. As you can see, I got it right there, and I was watching on my TV. Now, Unlawful Entry is a 1992 psychological thriller. And people had told me to check this movie out, and luckily what happened was Scream Factory had 1,500 or 1,600 copies that sold out, and then they magically were able to print more. So this makes you wonder if all those limited prints that they do, if they have to do that or if they just do that. But sure enough, it sold out, and, you know, I also saw some people really upset that they bought the Blu-ray, and then it sold out, and then they said, hey, we're going to do more. I don't know why they'd be upset. I mean, I'm just glad to own the movie. Thank God they restocked it, because I missed it. So when they restocked it, I said, okay, I got to pick up Unlawful Entry, and I'll tell you why. The first reason why is because I watched a movie sometime last year. I streamed it because I didn't buy it on Blu-ray. I think it may be available on Blu-ray. I need to grab it. It might be out from Paramount, but it's a movie called The Breakdown, or just Breakdown with Kurt Russell, and I fell in love with it. So I watched this movie Unlawful Entry, and it was incredible. I mean, if you didn't grab this Blu-ray, pray to God that they print more, because Unlawful Entry was this movie about Ray Liotta, who's one of my favorite actors. Rest in peace, Ray. I wish he was still with us. I miss him. He was such a great actor. I didn't know him, but I just miss him. I wish he was still alive and well because he was such a good actor. This movie is about Kurt Russell and his girlfriend, who is played by Madeline Stowe. Beautiful woman in that movie, too. And they have a break-in. Somebody breaks in. And one of the cops that shows up is Ray Liotta. And you can tell he's fascinated with Kurt Russell's wife. And he starts to kind of befriend them and get really close to them to kind of manipulate them. And it's one of those kinds of movies where you, the audience, see what's really going on. And you want to just scream at the people in the movie to protect them, but you can't. It was incredible. It's just an incredible movie. Star-studded cast, Kurt Russell, Madeline Stowe, Ray Liotta, just a sensational movie. I fell in love with it. But it kind of got me on this bender. I said, let me watch more movies that are like this. This is what I think is defined as a thriller. And I'm not saying that because I'm making fun of the term. It's a thriller. That's just that's what these movies are called. And this came out in the early 90s. So it made me want to watch some movies I hadn't seen before. And it made me want to revisit some movies that would be in the same vein of this. So the next movie I revisited was a movie I saw, and I actually have it from Scream Factory. It's called Single White Female. Now, Single White Female is this movie about this girl who needs a roommate. She is single white female on her newspaper ad, and the person that comes into the house is crazy. I mean, it's as simple as that. Great movie. I really liked it. And so it got me wanting to watch different movies during that time. And I remember I wanted to revisit this movie I hadn't seen for years and years. It's a Macaulay Culkin movie of all actors, and it was a movie called The Good Son. And talk about a nail-biter of a movie. I mean, it really has you at the edge of your seat, and Macaulay Culkin is so good at being evil. It's actually really fascinating to see Macaulay do that role, because up until that point, he was just the most lovable kid in the Home Alone films, and then you can look at him in My Girl. I mean, he's just so damn lovable, but he pulls off playing this sinister kid. So that was a great movie. And so I went online, and I was like, let me look up other movies that are like that. I'm going somewhere with this, guys. There's a movie called Pacific Heights. A couple work hard to renovate their dream home and become landlords to pay for it. Unfortunately, one of their tenants has plans of their own. And so I watched Pacific Heights, and that was from 1990. Loved it to death. Then I went to my movie shelf, and I was like, let me watch this other movie. And this is a movie called The Game. Another movie. Just fell in love with it. Loved it so much. And then one of my favorite movies of the 90s is actually in this category of what can be described as thriller. A movie called Cape Fear. Cape Fear is Robert De Niro. I think it's even Martin Scorsese directing. He is a prisoner who comes out of prison, and he really kind of stalks the lawyer that was the prosecutor, and he manipulates the family. He works his way into their lives. It's also a remake too, but incredible movie. These movies are so good, and to me, I find them, no pun intended, so thrilling, but scary. Like, I'm scared watching these movies. They have my heart pounding. They have my heart beating. Speaking of heart beating, there's another movie from the 90s. I think Arrow put out a 4K, and I want to go grab it now because I have a rinky-dink Blu-ray version of it, and I really want to see it. It's a movie called Flatliners, and it's this movie about this group that get off. It's almost like a drug to them. They flatline themselves to where they're about to die, and then their friends revive them with equipment and stuff, and of course this goes horribly wrong. But these movies are incredible. And so there's a few more I went back and checked out. Sleeping with the Enemy, Julia Roberts, where the movie is so good. And she moves away from this abusive husband she has. She meets this other guy, but she doesn't know who to trust. She doesn't know what's going on. She feels like she could be in trouble at any moment with the people around her. It's so good. Sleeping with the Enemy is a movie I would love, like a Criterion 4K for, if that ever happens. I don't know if it will. And I talked earlier about Breakdown with Kurt Russell. I mean, this is the plot of this movie. Her and her wife are driving cross country. They break down, and the wife hops in this 18-wheeler with this guy to go to a gas station or something to get help or whatever. But she doesn't show up. As a matter of fact, Kurt starts freaking out when she doesn't show up soon enough, and is looking everywhere. He goes to the diner. He's looking for this. He's looking for that. He actually sees the guy who's driving the 18-wheeler that kidnapped that had his wife, that was with his wife, and he stops him. He's trying to talk to him, and the guy is like, "I don't even know who you are. Who are you?" And it's a great movie. It's a great movie. I'm sorry if I kind of spoiled. I'm sorry if I kind of spoiled something there. And so, like, I went on this bender of checking out all these movies, and let me see, there's a few more I watched. Where's it at? Fear is another one. Fear is kind of like this movie, Unlawful Entry. Fear is Marky Mark. When Nicole met David, handsome, charming, affectionate, he was everything. It seemed perfect, but soon she sees that David has a darker side. Fear is a movie. I streamed it. I rented it, I think, for $2.99. I have to own this movie on a collector's release. I want to hear Mark talk about it. I am not a Mark Wahlberg fan. That is my favorite Mark Wahlberg movie. It had been years since I'd seen it, and he creeps me out in that movie. So Fear was another one. And there's more movies. The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. You see where I'm kind of going with this. Raising Cain even. Where am I going with all this? Because the title of the video is I Was Wrong About the 90s. What is the definition of horror? This is something I want to talk about. This is what I find interesting. The definition of horror is an intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. Informal, a bad or mischievous person. There's a number of definitions you could look at for horror. But for me, the definition I go is the main definition. Intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust, or a thing causing a feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. Or a literary term for movies is a literary of film genre concerned with arousing feelings of horror. Go back to the first definition. A thing causing feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. I don't think horror died in the 90s. I think it morphed into what's known as the thriller. And I don't think thriller should be an ugly word. I look at thriller, in my opinion, that I think thriller is a form of horror. And I'm going based off of the definitions I get from Webster. But this is not something I really want to debate about. I just want to express, or I'll have a conversation with you in the chat, but I'm saying I don't want to argue if you have a different opinion. I'll never do that. I'm making my opinion known in this video so that way you can go in the comments and share your opinion, which I'll like to read and talk to you guys about. But I don't think it really died. I think horror in the 80s died. That's a better answer. That's a better statement. Horror of the 1980s died in the 90s. Horror wasn't dead in the 90s. I just think it changed. Because a lot of these movies I watched today, I had more arousals of stress, anxiety, and fear than a lot of slashers. Now, I enjoy watching slashers, so that's not really a fair comparison. But I just think thriller became the horror of the 90s before Scream. And you could even argue Scream has a lot of thrilling aspects to it. And that's the way I kind of see it now. Because when you really watch some of these movies, especially one like Unlawful Entry, it's scary shit. I mean, Ray Liotta is a madman, and he'll stop at nothing, and he will manipulate. He will make the wife really start to think one way, but he's doing different stuff behind her back and dealing with Kurt Russell in a different way. And it's scary because it's like, who's going to stop this? This is, and I think naturally people will have different opinions of horror, and I get that, and I totally respect that. But to me, I agree that when I think of horror, if you just say the word horror to me, it is something that brings about a feeling of dread, fear, shock, or disgust. And these movies have so many fear-filling elements to them, like Unlawful Entry, like The Good Son. I mean, this is real-life stuff in these movies for the most part. A lot of them, maybe not like Flatliners. I don't think people are literally killing themselves and bringing themselves right back for fun. So that may be a stretched example, but yeah, I think when you look back, in my estimation, I don't really think horror died in the 90s. I think the horror of the 80s died going into the 90s, and it morphed into what's known as the thriller or the psychological thriller. And quite frankly, there are some damn good movies in that time period from 90 to 95 that fall under that category. And that's not to say that horror of the 80s was completely dead. I mean, you could clearly take a movie like Candyman and make it come out 5 years earlier, and it probably would have been as much of a smash success. You could also argue that the fact that Candyman came out in 92 helped it a lot more because it did stand out. But you look at the elements of Candyman, a lot of it are kind of, not thriller, but the way that movie looks and feels, it has that same feel of the stuff in the 90s naturally because it came out in 1992. So it's not I don't think it's just a clear mixed bag, and I also don't think it's fair for me to just say, oh no, horror didn't die in the 90s. You had to go to the video store, because it's not that I disagree with myself per se, but I think I'm just not giving the clearest picture when I say that. That's just not fair, I don't think, to say, oh, horror wasn't dead, you just had to go to the video store. Movies like Unlawful Entry, The Breakdown, movies like even Jacob's Ladder, Fear, movies like Single White Female, movies like even Misery. Misery is really somewhat of a thriller. I mean, it has a lot of the same exact elements in terms of the audience member has to sit there and watch somebody get manipulated, lied to, this psychological, damning person doing these horrible things. But it's really not a blood and guts movie at all like the stuff from the 80s. I mean, Misery could be defined... as a matter of fact, I think when I went to a couple movie sites, when I was getting ready to film this video, because I kind of... This was not something I planned on filming tonight. This is actually a video idea that I had that... just happened in the moment, and I was like, yeah, I want to talk to my audience about this to see how they all feel. A couple of the sites I looked up, the first thing from Misery was thriller. It wasn't even horror. Now, that's that's not really an argument I should use, but I found that extremely interesting. And that's something I'd like to hear what Stephen King would have to say if he considers Misery a horror film or not. Obviously, the horror fans like us, we love it. And you could say it's a horror film, and I wouldn't argue that, but there are thriller aspects to it, I think, for sure. So I'm really fascinated and really into what's known as the 90s thriller now, because some of these movies, guys, are incredible. Going back to Cape Fear, that is probably as good of a movie to me as anything horror related in the 90s. In my opinion, I think it's incredible. I mean, Cape Fear, which again is a remake with De Niro, he is freaky good in that movie, and he's scary, and he's a manipulator, and he's cunning, and you wouldn't want to be around this person in real life. And another cool thing about a lot of these movies, again, take Sleeping with the Enemy, for instance. It's like, you know, they had big name actors doing this, and so you had some extremely great performances in movies like Sleeping with the Enemy with Julia Roberts, in movies like The Game. The Game is a great movie. Pacific Heights. You know, you had all these big name actors, and Kurt Russell seemed to be the thriller guy of the 90s. You know, seeing movies like Unlawful Entry and The Breakdown are two of the best of the movies I've mentioned. I can't put over how good this movie was, Unlawful Entry. So yeah, just incredible film, incredible film. So I guess the purpose of this video is for me to say, I feel like I'm somewhat wrong about the 90s. I just don't think it's as simple as me saying you just had to go to the video store and rent Charlie Band films. That's somewhat irresponsible of me, and quite frankly, I'm kind of ashamed that I haven't promoted and pushed more of these titles to my audience, because we get new horror fans every day, and you know they check out the Michaels, the Jasons, the Freddys. I'm with you. Part of my life. I love those movies. But the 90s has some of these movies that are known as thrillers, psychological thrillers, that if you don't consider it horror, it's definitely off of the family tree of horror, at the very least, I think. And some of these movies are incredible. Like, if you haven't seen a lot of these movies I've mentioned, guys, I'd say go to Sleeping with the Enemy, then do The Good Son, then do Kurt Russell's Unlawful Entry or Breakdown. And if that doesn't get you hooked, and some of the in this era, it's just like, wow. I mean, these are blood-pumping movies. They got you on the edge of your seat, like, what the hell is about to happen? And just such great performances because you had great actors in these movies. So, I don't know. I feel like I'm somewhat awakened with this. Like, watching this movie really just, like, knocked me upside the head and said, Christian, like, you know what? There is such good stuff in the 90s. You need to either revisit it because it's been a long time since you've seen it. Like The Good Son I hadn't seen since maybe 2008, you know, something like that. And I loved it. It was so good. Pacific Heights I'd never seen, like an idiot. Like, I watched Pacific Heights yesterday and I freaking loved it. I loved it. You know, and I'm hoping you watching this video, you might actually have some recommendations for me in that respect too. Going through this, like 1990 through 1996, 1997-ish. Another movie, this is one of the best thrillers I've ever seen, and never gets talked about. I think it's even lost on physical media, guys. It's a movie called The Rich Man's Wife with Halle Berry. I'm pretty sure that's Halle Berry. Let me just make sure. The Rich Man's Wife. This is a 1996 film. Yes, that's Halle Berry. This movie is effing incredible. And Rotten Tomatoes can kiss my freaking ass because it's got a 13%. That is bullshit. I will fight those Rotten Tomatoes reviews to the death and say The Rich Man's Wife, which I own a DVD of when I was going through my movies. I remembered when I got that DVD, I picked it up on a whim just to pick it up, and it was so good. It's about Halle Berry. She's a rich man's wife, and they go out to this resort, but the husband has serious drinking issues, and she meets somebody at the bar when she kind of escaped all the noise for a few nights, or she went on a vacation and the husband couldn't go yet because of a work-related thing. He was going to meet her the next couple days, and she meets this guy, and she kind of confides in him a little too much about her issues, and things start to get really ugly. It was so good, and movies like these have really awakened me. I just think horror didn't die in the 90s. It morphed. the horror of the 80s died in the 90s for the most part. Not totally. Not totally, obviously. Pumpkinhead 2, there's stuff like Witchboard, which is awesome, or Witchboard 2, excuse me. But it just morphed into what's known as a psychological thriller, which I can accept if the majority of you will say in this video that's not horror. I can accept that, but for me, I get the same emotions out of it from watching horror films. And to me, it's just like, if it's not, okay, but it's definitely off the family tree. And these movies there's so many incredible movies that I'm just falling in love with. And I'm excited and I'm passionate about this thriller genre from the 90s. Unlawful Entry awoken something in me, guys, and I'm all about it right now. So, guys, I want to thank you for watching this video. I don't want to go too much longer. I really want this to open a discussion about horror in the 90s. I want us to open a discussion about the thrillers of the 90s. If you think it does fall in line with horror movies, if you get the same kind of emotions and feelings out of it, of being scared. That's what horror is all about. And a lot of these movies, while it may not make me want to pull the blanket over my face, I'm leaning forward. I'm doing the opposite. And I'm just like, oh my God, what's about to happen? Is he going to get away with this? What's going on? I get the same kind of visceral reactions out of these movies. So to me, it's just like, it's incredible. I'm loving these movies, guys. I really hope we can get a discussion going about more movies that I can check out and about your thoughts on the 90s thriller era, and if you think that is the horror of the 90s. Thank you guys for watching this video. It's your old pal CHH. Make your voices heard down below. I really am excited to see what you guys say about this. So I love you guys, and I'll see y'all next time. Take care. Huge giant thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Without you guys, this would not be possible. To get behind the scenes photos, videos, music, private live streams, and much more, you can subscribe to my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Thank you to my patrons.